won Best Picture, changed how Hollywood talked about Vietnam, and left audiences stunned into silence. But even people who have watched it multiple times are still missing things. Here are 25 small details you missed in The Deer Hunter, 1978.
Axel something! Mike scooped the belt!
Detail 25. The script started out in Las Vegas. The Russian roulette scenes that define the film's center did not originate in the Vietnam War. The original, unproduced screenplay, written by Louis A. Garfinkel and Quinn K. Redeker, entitled The Man Who Came to Play, was set in Las Vegas, where gamblers played Russian roulette as a high-stakes underground game. Producer Michael Dealey bought the script, hired Michael Cimino to develop it, and Cimino, working with Derek Washburn, moved the Russian roulette element from the casino world into the jungle prison of Vietnam. The war context gave the same mechanism an entirely different emotional weight. Garfinkel, Redeker, Washburn, and Cimino all received Oscar nominations for Best Original Screenplay, an unusual situation given how substantially the material had been transformed from its starting point.
You want a beer or something like that? Want a beer or something?
Okay. Sure.
What kind of beer?
Detail 24. Roy Scheider was cast first and left, 2 weeks before filming. The role of Michael Vronsky, the stoic, controlled hunter who becomes the moral center of the film, was not initially Robert De Niro's. Roy Scheider, who had come off Jaws in 1975 and Marathon Man in 1976, was attached to the lead. 2 weeks before principal photography began, Scheider withdrew due to what was described as creative differences with Cimino. Producer Dealey immediately pursued De Niro, who was paid $1 million for the role, his first 7-figure fee, and described the script as something he immediately connected with. Universal, which had Scheider under a 3-picture deal, managed to hold him to his contract obligation by assigning him to Jaws 2, which entered production around the same time.
Yeah, I did.
Did you get one?
Yeah, no.
You didn't get it, dear?
Didn't get anything. No.
Huh?
Detail 23. De Niro worked in a steel mill for 9 months, under a false name. To prepare for the role of a Russian-American steelworker, Robert De Niro did not simply observe the world he was about to portray. He worked in an actual steel mill for approximately 9 months before production began, laboring at a blast furnace as an ordinary employee under a false name. No one on the factory floor knew who he was. He also spent time socializing with steelworkers in local bars and visiting their homes. When Cimino introduced him to the production as Harry Ufland, his agent's name, no one recognized him. De Niro later described The Deer Hunter as his most physically exhausting film and said the scene in which Mike visits the hospitalized Stephen for the first time was the most emotionally demanding scene of his entire career.
It's okay. It's a wedding, you know. It's supposed to go have fun. All that.
Detail 22. Meryl Streep wrote her own lines. Streep's role as Linda was described in the screenplay as a vague, stock girlfriend, thin material with minimal substance. Cimino acknowledged the character's limitations and encouraged Streep to write her own dialogue. She did, constructing Linda's voice and interior life largely from scratch. The result was a performance nuanced enough to earn Streep her first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. She had come to the film primarily to be with John Cazale, to whom she was engaged, and who had been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer before filming began. The role she agreed to play as a secondary concern became one of the most praised elements of a film full of praised elements.
Nick, this is the groom, Steve. I'm the best man.
Detail 21. De Niro spotted Streep on stage and pushed for her to be cast. Meryl Streep was not well known when The Deer Hunter was in preparation. She had appeared briefly in the 1977 film Julia and in the television miniseries Holocaust in 1978, but had not yet established herself as a significant film presence. De Niro had seen her in a stage production of The Cherry Orchard and was struck by what he saw. He specifically suggested to Cimino and the producers that Streep play Linda. The recommendation from one of the film's central creative forces carried considerable weight, and Streep was cast. It was among the more consequential casting suggestions in the history of American film, given the trajectory of her career from that point forward.
You know what that son of a bitch is doing?
Detail 20. John Cazale was terminally ill, and the studio didn't know. John Cazale, who plays the volatile, insecure Stan in the film, had been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer before production began. Cimino knew. The producers and Streep knew. Universal Pictures did not. When the studio eventually discovered the situation, Cazale was deemed uninsurable, and the studio moved to replace him with another actor. Streep threatened to leave the production entirely if Cazale was removed. Cimino backed her position, and De Niro, who had worked with Cazale on The Godfather Part 2, Dog Day Afternoon, and The Conversation, and had enormous respect for him as a performer, stepped forward and personally paid the insurance costs to keep Cazale in the film. It was a significant gesture. Cazale had appeared in only 5 films in his entire career, and every single one of them received a Best Picture nomination. All of Cazale's scenes were filmed first, in sequence, so that he could complete his work before his condition deteriorated further. He died on March 12, 1978, shortly after filming Wrapped. He never saw the finished film. Detail 19. Clairton was actually 8 separate towns. The fictional Clairton, Pennsylvania, the steel town at the heart of the film's first and third acts, does not exist as a single location. The production filmed in 8 separate towns across 3 states: Clairton, McKeesport, and Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, Weirton and Follansbee in West Virginia, and Steubenville, Mingo Junction, and Struthers in Ohio. These locations were edited together seamlessly to create the impression of a single coherent community. The steelworks visible in different scenes are also different plants, shot in different places. Vilmos Zsigmond, the film's cinematographer, desaturated the color of exterior shots, partly in camera and partly in laboratory processing, to give the images the pale, washed-out feel of a working-class town in autumn. Detail 18. The wedding was filmed in summer but set in fall, and it shows. The elaborate wedding sequence, one of the most celebrated stretches of film in the entire picture, was shot in the summer in temperatures around 95 degrees Fahrenheit, but the story requires it to take place in the fall. To achieve this, individual leaves were removed by hand from the surrounding trees to approximate a late autumn look. The extras cast as wedding guests, real people drawn from local communities, drank actual liquor and beer throughout the filming. The production manager had asked each extra to bring a gift-wrapped box from home to use as a prop wedding present, on the theory that it would be faster and more convincing than the studio preparing fake gifts. When Cimino inspected the boxes, he noticed they were significantly heavier than empty boxes should be. The extras had filled them with real presents. Detail 17. The wedding church, was a real Russian Orthodox cathedral in Cleveland. The church used for the wedding ceremony, the visual centerpiece of the film's extended first act, is the St. Theodosius Russian Orthodox Cathedral in the Tremont neighborhood of Cleveland, Ohio. It is a real working church built in 1911, and the production used it as an active filming location rather than dressing a substitute to look like it. The priest who performs the ceremony in the film is an actual priest, Father Stephen Kopostansky of St. Theodosius, who was cast in the role and appears in his own church conducting a wedding that is not entirely real. The wedding sequence took 5 days to film. The reception was filmed at the nearby Lemco Association Hall. Detail 16. The deer hunting scenes were filmed in Washington State, not Pennsylvania. The sweeping mountain sequences in which Michael hunts deer, the film's recurring symbol of control, precision, and the singular lethal moment, were not filmed anywhere near Pennsylvania. The production traveled to Washington State, shooting in the Cascade Mountains. The prominent peak visible in the background of the hunting sequences is Mount Shuksan, near the town of Bellingham in the northwestern corner of the state. For the scene in which the deer is actually shot, cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond had the trained animal given a mild sedative, fenced off an area to limit the deer's movement, and positioned 2 cameras to ensure they captured the moment from the beginning. It took roughly half an hour for the sedative to take effect. Detail 15. The Vietnam scenes were filmed in Thailand during a military coup. The Deer Hunter was the first Hollywood feature to film the Vietnam War on actual location in Thailand, rather than on a studio backlot or in another country. Cimino insisted on the authenticity that only real Southeast Asian environments could provide, and the decision pushed the budget well beyond its original figure, from approximately $8.5 million initially to $15 million by the end of production. The production shot in Bangkok, which stood in for Saigon, and in the Kanchanaburi district near the Burmese border, on and around the River Kwai. What the production did not fully anticipate was that filming would coincide with a military uprising in Thailand. The country's military leader, General Kriengsak Chomanan, was so taken with the production that he provided military vehicles, weapons, and aircraft to the filmmakers, supplying the kind of logistical support that no studio could have arranged through normal channels, while simultaneously managing the political transition of his government. He wanted a production credit on the film for his contributions. The film's Bangkok street scenes used the actual international terminal at Don Muang Airport as the U.S. airfield, and the evacuation sequences were filmed on Thong Wat Road in the city. Detail 14. The river cage scenes were shot in the River Kwai during monsoon season. The sequences in which Mike, Nick, and Steven are held captive in bamboo cages submerged in the river, among the most harrowing stretches of the film, were filmed in the actual River Kwai during monsoon season. The water level could vary by 10 to 20 feet overnight due to rainfall. The cages contained live rats. Cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond described the environment as containing a significant number of deadly snakes, though the crew had anti-venom on hand. The physical conditions for the actors, submerged for extended periods in fast-moving, unpredictable water, were genuinely dangerous, and the performances reflect the stress of shooting in those conditions rather than manufactured distress. Detail 13. The The Saigon evacuation was staged with 6,000 extras. The chaotic scenes depicting the fall of Saigon, the desperate evacuation, the crowds, the collapse of order, were filmed in Bangkok on a street called Trong Wat Road. Cimino put out a call for 800 extras to fill the frame. 6,000 people showed up. The production used them all. The sense of overwhelming human chaos that fills those sequences came not from careful film choreography, but from the reality of that many bodies reacting to a shared environment. The film does also incorporate actual news footage of the 1975 American evacuation of Saigon, spliced into the stage sequences, though distinguishing between the real and reconstructed elements requires a close eye. Detail 12. The slapping in the Russian roulette scenes was real. The actor cast as the Viet Cong referee who oversees the Russian roulette games, Somsak Sengvilai, was specifically chosen because he was known to hold a particular dislike toward Americans. The slaps he delivers to De Niro and Walken in the scene were not staged. They were genuine, full-force slaps, delivered with real hostility. The production had initially tried other local actors in the role, but the first one hired was unwilling or unable to actually strike De Niro in the face with conviction. Once Sengvilai was cast, no such hesitation existed. The agitation and anger visible in the actors' faces during the Russian roulette sequences came in part from the sustained physical reality of being slapped repeatedly over multiple takes. Detail 11. Cimino had Walken spit in De Niro's face without warning. In the film's late scene when Michael finally finds Nick in the Saigon gambling den, Nick blank-eyed, disconnected, no longer recognizing his closest friend. Cimino wanted De Niro's reaction to have genuine shock in it. He arranged privately with Christopher Walken to spit directly in De Niro's face at a moment De Niro was not expecting. Walken did it. De Niro's reaction, the flash of fury barely contained, was not performance. He was genuinely livid, reportedly to the point of nearly walking off the set. The take was used in the film. Cimino later said of Walken's willingness to carry out the action, "He's got balls."
I'll get started on the egg.
Detail 10. A live bullet was in the gun. During filming, De Niro's idea. During the Russian roulette sequences, a live round was actually placed in the revolver's cylinder to heighten the tension for the actors. The idea was Robert De Niro's. The production team took precautions to ensure the live chamber was tracked and accounted for, that the firing pin would not strike it. But the weight of a real loaded gun with a real bullet in it was present during those scenes. Walken later described what it did to the atmosphere on set. The knowledge that the weapon was genuinely loaded changed the quality of the fear in the room, and that quality is visible on screen.
Like a goddamn traffic cop. Come on, give me a beer, man. Come on.
Detail 9. Chuck Aspegren was a real steelworker, not an actor. The character of Axel, Peter Axel Axelrod, one of the group of friends at the film's center, is played by Chuck Aspegren. Aspegren was not an actor. He was the working foreman at a steel plant in East Chicago that De Niro and Cimino visited during pre-production research. They were struck by his presence, his manner, and the ease with which he occupied the world the film was trying to portray. They offered him the role on the spot. He was the second person cast in the film, after De Niro. Aspegren brought to the screen not a performance of steelworker life, but the actual thing, and the camera responded to it.
Hello? I'm calling the United States.
Detail 8. The film was shot entirely on location, no sound stages. Every frame of The Deer Hunter was shot on actual location. Cimino rejected any use of sound stages from the outset, insisting that the material required the texture and weight of real environments. The steel mills are real mills. The church is a real church. The bars are real bars. The mountains are real mountains. The river in Thailand is the actual River Kwai, the same river made famous by David Lean's 1957 film of the same name. Producer Dealey had wanted to avoid location-only shooting given the logistical and financial risks, but Cimino held firm. There was discussion about shooting the film on a backlot, Dealey later recalled, but the material demanded more realism. The cast and crew also watched extensive news footage of the actual Vietnam War during production to calibrate their understanding of what they were portraying. This commitment to physical authenticity had direct consequences for the budget and schedule. The film originally projected at $8.5 million and came in at $15 million. But it gave the film a visual credibility that no constructed environment could have achieved. Detail 7. Walken ate only rice and bananas to achieve Nick's hollowness. To embody the deteriorating Nick in the Saigon sequences, the man so damaged by his experience that he no longer recognizes his closest friends and has retreated into a cycle of Russian roulette gambling. Christopher Walken restricted his diet to rice and bananas. The physical thinness, the hollow quality in his face, the distance in his eyes in those scenes are not the results of makeup or lighting alone. Walken was genuinely depleted. The approach contributed to a performance that won him the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor and launched the second, arguably more significant phase of his film career. Detail 6. John Wayne presented Best Picture, and he hated the film. At the 51st Academy Awards in April 1979, John Wayne made one of his final public appearances to present the Oscar for Best Picture. The film he handed the award to was The Deer Hunter. Wayne had seen the film and found it deeply objectionable. It presented a Vietnam experience that conflicted entirely with his own idealized vision of American military service, which he had expressed in the Green Berets a decade earlier. He presented the award regardless, because that was the protocol. The image of Wayne handing Best Picture to a film he personally disliked is one of the unremarked ironies of that ceremony. Detail 5. The theme music was composed by Stanley Myers and played by John Williams. The haunting piece of music that runs through the film, the acoustic guitar melody most people associate with The Deer Hunter, is Cavatina, composed by Stanley Myers. It predated the film. Myers had written it in 1970 as a standalone piece, several years before Cimino heard it and recognized that it captured exactly the film's emotional register. The piece has a quality of unresolved longing that suited the story's particular combination of tenderness and loss. On the recording used in the film, Cavatina is played by John Williams, not the film composer John Williams of Star Wars and Jaws fame, but the British classical and flamenco guitarist of the same name, who was one of the most accomplished and celebrated players in the world at that time, and had been associated with a number of major recordings throughout the 1960s and 1970s. The two John Williamses caused considerable confusion in press coverage and reviews of the film, with many writers attributing the guitar piece to the film's more famous namesake. Myers and guitarist Williams recorded a full version of Cavatina as a single following the film's release, and it reached number 13 on the UK charts in 1979. Detail 4. A Vietnam veteran was inspired to build the wall memorial by this film. Jan Scruggs, a Vietnam veteran who had been wounded during his service, attended a screening of The Deer Hunter in March 1979. Walking out of the theater, he was struck with the idea of building a permanent national memorial to the Americans who had died in the war. Scruggs established and ran the memorial fund that eventually raised the money to build the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. The black granite wall that now bears the names of 58,279 Americans killed in the conflict. It was dedicated in November 1982. Cimino was invited to the opening ceremony. The connection between a film and the creation of one of the country's most visited public monuments is rarely mentioned when people talk about The Deer Hunter. Detail 3. The extras brought real wedding gifts, and Cimino used all of them. When the production manager asked extras to bring wrapped empty boxes from home to serve as fake wedding gifts for the reception scene, the extras took the instruction more literally than intended. They brought actual presents, wrapped and filled. When Cimino inspected the boxes on set and found them heavier than empty containers would be, he realized what had happened. He kept every box in the scene, rather than having them removed and replaced with properly empty props. The gifts in the wedding reception sequence are real gifts, brought by real people who had decided that if they were going to pretend to be wedding guests, they were going to do it properly. The detail adds something to those scenes that could not have been manufactured.
They're gonna be so mad when they find out they missed you.
Detail 2. CBS paid $5 million for the TV broadcast rights. Before The Deer Hunter had even opened in theaters, CBS paid $5 million for the exclusive American network television broadcast rights to the film. This was an extraordinary sum for a film by a director who had only one previous feature to his name, and whose new project carried what producer Michael Dealey had described as a gruesome-sounding storyline. The advance payment from CBS helped anchor the film's financing at a point when selling the project to investors and distributors was genuinely difficult. It also reflected what the network believed the film could deliver once it was finished, an assessment the Academy Awards confirmed. Detail 1. The film helped inspire the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. The legacy of The Deer Hunter extends beyond film. It won 5 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Christopher Walken, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound. Vilmos Zsigmond's cinematography was nominated but did not win, something the film community has remarked on for decades, given the visual quality of what he achieved. Meryl Streep received her first Oscar nomination. De Niro was nominated for Best Actor. And the war that the film depicted with such unsparing force became more fully acknowledged, more publicly grieved, because the film had put it in front of audiences who had been looking away. Jan Scruggs built a memorial for 58,279 names, partly because of what he felt walking out of a screening. John Cazale gave his last performance in it and never saw what he had been part of. The cast and crew filmed in a country in the middle of a military coup, in a river full of snakes with a loaded gun, and they made something that held 25 details embedded in one of American cinema's most enduring and demanding films. If this one was worth your time, hit the like button and subscribe. There is a lot more waiting for you.